This video is for lesson 4 of the year 7 light topic entitled the eye. By the end of the lesson you should be able to recall the names of the major parts of the eye, understand the functions of those major parts, and describe how the eye enables us to see things. Okay, so to begin with, let's look at the parts of the eye that we can see. The dark hole in the center, which a lot of you will be familiar with, is called the pupil. It's a hole in the coloured part called the iris, and a white part of the eye is called the sclera. If we look at the eye in a little bit more detail, on the right hand side here, the very outer part of the eye, part of the eye that you can touch if you put your fingers very carefully on the surface, is called the cornea. The light passes through the cornea, then a hole in the iris called the pupil, which you already mentioned, and then it passes through a part of the eye called the lens, and then the light goes into this jelly-like substance called the vitreous humor, which sort of gives the eyeball its rigid shape. And at the back here you've got a very important part of the eye called the retina, and connected to the retina is the optic nerve. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to look at what those various parts do. Okay, so we're going to look at the passage of light as it comes from the left through our eye to the right to form an image here. Okay, so the first thing that the light does is it passes through this clear layer in front of the eye called the cornea. Okay, and the cornea's job essentially is to produce a sharp image of our object, so it allows us to see things clearly. So after the cornea, this outer layer here, the light then passes through the hole in the iris, the pupil, and it encounters the lens. Now the lens really makes the image really sharp, so it's like a fine tuning. Sometimes you use that on a microscope, don't you? You've got that extra adjustment. That's what our lens does. It fine tunes the image to make it nice and sharp for us. Now, unlike lenses in a camera or a projector, the eye lens can actually change its shape so that we can see things which are close to us and further apart. Now it does so by using a ring of muscles called the ciliary muscles, and they either contract or relax, and when they do so they change the shape of the lens. So this lens can be made fatter or it can be made thinner, depending on whether we're looking at a close object or a far object. So their job is to change the shape of the lens itself. The light then passes through the vitreous humor here, and it strikes the back of the eyeball and a part called the cornea, and the cornea is made up of hundreds of thousands of light sensitive cells, and it's the job of those light sensitive cells to change light into small amounts of electricity. Those small amounts of electricity then travel via the optic nerve to our brain, and it's at that point we can then see the image. If I were you, I'd pause the video for a moment and just make sure that you understand the direction which the light travels and what the various parts do. You may have heard that when we look at things, we're looking at things as they are upside down. Well, that's true in a certain sense. The eye actually turns the objects that we're looking at upside down. So if we look at the top of the pencil here, a ray of light travelling in a nice straight line goes through the lens, and the top of the pencil is at the bottom of the eye, and the bottom of the pencil is at the top of the eye. And what our brain does is it then turns that image in the eye the right way around, the correct way around, so we can see. So the image in the eye is actually inverted upside down, and our brain turns it the right way up. Okay, so take a look at the animation here. The 5 grey clouds here are spaces where the coloured cloud should go in order in which the light travels from the outside into our eyes and forms an image. So let's pause the video for a moment, see if you can work out what goes where, okay? And we'll go through that in a moment. Okay, so the first part of the eye the light enters is this outer bit here called the cornea, which helps to focus the light. The light then has to get into the eye via this hole here, which is called the pupil. The light then passes through the lens, then through the lens, through the vitreous humour, where it hits the back of the eye, which is called the retina, full of light sensitive cells which change the light into electric signals, which then travel via the optic nerve to our brain. So well done if you got those. One last thing for today then. We've already said the pupil is a hole in the iris which allows light to enter the eye. Without it we wouldn't be able to see anything, so we need light to get in there. Now the size of the pupil can change depending upon the amount of light that there is around. If there's very little light in a room, the pupil can expand to allow more light into the eye. So if it's dark, we need to get more light into the eye so we can see things clearly. So let's see what happens to the pupil when we turn the light off. Okay, so there's the pupil expanding, so it allows more light in, so we've got a better chance of seeing the image. Now, too much light can damage the eye. You're always warned not to look directly at the sun. So the pupil can shrink in size to protect the eye. So if we now turn the light back on, the pupil then shrinks, protecting our eye. We get the right amount of light so that we can see. Okay, the last thing that I'd like you to do then is to download and complete the Word document entitled How We See with Our Eyes. If you can't download it, you've had problems, then the PowerPoint here, this slide here, is a little summary of what's on there. Now I'm afraid you will have to hand draw it if necessary. So the first thing is to do is to draw and label the diagram and then place these boxes in the correct sequence. That's only if you can't download the Word document. Okay, so you should now be able to name the important parts of the eye, such as the cornea, the pupil, lens, retina, and say what they do. And you should also be able to describe the path of light through the eye that enables us to see.